Recently, I've been trying to go back and play a lot of games I played growing up. Whether it's Spore, Lego Star Wars, or any of the putt-putt games, which I got stuck on for over an hour, the games I grew up with hold a special place in my heart, and not for just nostalgia. It's where my love for video games started, so naturally I wanted to know more about the development of my favorite games, and started looking at beta builds. And while there's tons to talk about in detail with you all today, I just thought I would pick out 10 builds of various games released or cancelled that we could discuss. So with that being said, sit back, relax, grab a snack, get some water, boot up a game, start playing, and get cozy, because today we're talking about 10 lost and intriguing video game builds. Number 10. Total Wormage. Who doesn't love the 1995 classic Worms? The turn-based strategy series involves teams of 4 worms commencing in worm warfare on various maps with various weapons to use, ranging from grenades to nuclear bombs to even skunks. The concept of the game goes all the way back to 1990 under the name Artillery, developed by Andy Davidson during his days in college. Davidson had created the game on his Casio graphing calculator, although he would later port it to the Commodore Amiga after deciding he wanted to make something more than what the calculator would allow. Originally working with the inspiration of the 1991 game Lemmings by DMA Design, also on the Amiga, Davidson would utilize their sprites while making Artillery. In 1993, the sprites would be switched out with worms, and the game renamed into Total Wormage, a nod to the 1992 game Total Carnage. In 1994, Davidson would approach the development company Team 17 to finish the game and get it published. This wouldn't take long, as the game had been nearly completed by the time Davidson approached Team 17. Granted, there was some stuff that he wanted to add, fix, etc., but the basis of the game and the functionality was pretty much established, and a year later in 1995, Total Wormage would be released under the name Worms. No copies of the original build of Total Wormage have been released. Davidson only ever showed it off to different publishers in 1994, and once before that in 1993 when entering it into a contest to win an Amiga 4000 system. A few quick snippets of game footage has been used here and there for promotional material during the release of the finalized Worms game, as well as screenshots being used in magazines. However, that's pretty much all that's available of Total Wormage. It's more than likely that Davidson has the original build somewhere within his possession, although it's extremely unlikely that he has any plans of releasing the Total Wormage build to the public. Number 9. Weedlinks. Weedlinks is one of the earliest documented builds of what would soon become Plants vs. Zombies. It was created in 2005, and this screenshot showcases how different it is to the base game. It features early designs of a cabbage pult, as well as these radish beet turnip guys, and they're all fighting the aliens from Insane Aquarium, a previous game also published by PopCap. The background of the level is some stock photo of a bunch of dirt, with the grass patches being around plants, just to show where the hitboxes are of the plants and where you can plant them. The HUD is wildly different, including a watering can in a normal level as opposed to the Zen Garden, a counter at the top, and a second space underneath it, the former being the conceptualized currency, as there was no official name of the sun feature yet, which the player would earn from those radish beet turnip guys. You use the watering can to start growing grass, so it actually has a bit of an in-game function, and then you can start growing your plants on it. Some video footage of the game is available online, however there is no release of the game publicly. From what I've seen, the video footage available of the game comes from private collectors, and there isn't too much of a desire to share the game publicly, so unfortunately Weedlinks is lost media until otherwise. Thankfully though, despite no public releases, the footage made available by collectors does give us an insight into how the build ran and how it would slowly turn into Plants vs. Zombies. Despite being a completely different appearance, the game and its basis are still so familiar. Number 8. Amaze. I'm a sucker for games like this. Amaze was a game planned to be exclusively released on the Nuon system. If you're not familiar with Nuon, don't worry, because this is, in my opinion, a glorified DVD player. It was an add-on that allowed the user to run their traditional DVDs along with video games and CDs on it, with hopes of incorporating internet access onto the next release of Nuon technology, which would never happen. The intention of the manufacturers, Toshiba, Motorola, Samsung, and RCA, was with the hopes of making it a direct competitor with other home video game systems at the time. So the Nuon system actually has a ton of lost games for it, a lot of which have very little evidence to support their existence, but not Amaze. Never Amaze. We actually have a substantial amount of information about this game since it was developed and ready to be distributed, and then just basically had the rug pulled out from under it. Completed game, ready to go, had its own MSRP value of $29.95, and boom, just gone, with no release or reason ever officially given. Copies of the game were ready to go, but it saw a sudden cancellation just before. This was likely due to the fact that the Nuon system just never took off. Kind of sad when you think about it. The website nuondome.com actually does have information and box art about the game and lists off its distinct features. The description of the game reads, Amaze is based on the classical board game that challenges you to tilt the board in order to roll a steel ball through a nerve-wracking maze of trap holes. Simple in theme, yet elegant in graphic nature, Amaze is best described as an overall experience that is highly addictive, yet surprisingly relaxing. From the outset, Amaze was designed to be attractive to all types of gamers, from hardcore to mainstream. Amaze is an engaging game for everyone. And then the features listed for it are true-to-life ball physics, easy to learn, and non-violent gameplay. The website has a few screenshots, however, few videos of gameplay have found themselves online. Despite so much available content, no playable copies of it have been released to the public, despite the fact that the game was ready to be distributed, with a release slated for February of 2001. Number 7. Zoid. Zoid was a homemade game developed in the 80s by television writer David X. Cohen. It was inspired by the 1981 puzzle game Kix, which fascinated Cohen so much that he would begin to work on his own version of the game for his Apple II home computer, the project going by the name Zoid. Cohen worked on this project for years, all during his free time while attending high school, completing it in 1985. He had hopes that this game would be picked up by publishers, so he submitted his project to the company Broderbund. However, he was met with rejection from the company. This was pretty much where the development of Zoid came to an end. Cohen stopped working on it, and it was lost to the sands of time. Until Zoidberg. In the early 90s, Cohen had become a writer on The Simpsons, and the creator Matt Groening would approach him to help conceive an idea for a sci-fi animated TV show, which would later go on to become Futurama. Cohen would go on to say in an episode commentary that his game Zoid was the inspiration of the name of Dr. John Zoidberg. There were subtle nods to Zoid throughout the show, and Cohen would mention it here and there throughout episode commentary. In a 2007 interview with Wired, Cohen would actually reveal that he was still in possession of the Zoid game. However, he's been unsuccessful at dumping the game online. Unfortunately, no photos, videos, assets, or anything really have found their way onto the internet. At this point in time, it doesn't look like Zoid will be seeing a dump on the internet. Looks like all we have left of this build is the words of Cohen himself. Although we can speculate that the game was quite similar to Kix, as it pretty much inspired it. Number 6. Savannah. Remember the Xbox Kinect? I wish I knew we'd have it in mind. I didn't play any noteworthy games with it, I just thought it was neat. In 2006, Rare would work with Phil Dunn to develop a game called Savannah, which would serve as an early prototype for what would soon become the Xbox Kinect. Savannah was one of many prototypes being developed by Rare to test the limitations and capabilities of the 360. However, Savannah was one of those really weird ones that makes you wonder what could have been if this game had saw a fully finished development cycle. The game plays like a nature simulator, having you play as a lion cub all the way through adulthood as you survive the perilous savannah which you call your home. The game was intended for a more mature audience, and while it was an ambitious idea, this was one of the reasons why the game was ultimately rejected by Microsoft, as the company wanted the Kinect and its features to be more family-friendly for a younger, generalized audience. The game had lots of ideas before cancellation, and had spent a significant time in production, over a year. Despite its cancellation, we do have a good look at assets and model animations of the game, giving us a look into what could have been. Honestly, the detail that went into designing these animals are amazing. It reminds me of one of those Animal Planet documentaries where they create a 3D render of what an animal would do in a hypothetical scenario. There was also a theme created for the game, which can be found online. While Microsoft may have canceled the project, it's still interesting to hear about the development team's plan to incorporate the motion tracking and even a new type of controller into their game. There have been theories that the game was reworked into the Kinect game Kinectables, which I guess I understand. The models are different, but that's understandable as the game would just be adjusted for a younger audience. Without its confirmation though, it's just speculation, and at the end of the day, the build is still lost media. Number 5. Mario Motors. Mario Motors is a game that, despite being developed sometime in the early 2000s, We didn't know about its existence until 2018, when it was revealed to the public at the Reboot Development Conference. An IGN article covering this reveal states that the game was the brainchild of Yuji Saito, and was intended to be a spin-off of the Mario Kart franchise on the Nintendo DS. Granted, we did get Mario Kart DS for the handheld console, but this game was unique from the regular Mario Kart series in the special feature that the player would be able to choose specific shapes of metal and sculpt their own design out of that, as opposed to the mainline series where the character chooses pre-made designs to customize their vehicles. Various ideas to integrate into the game were tossed between Saito, Shigeru Miyamoto, and the then president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata. One of these ideas was quickly dismissed, that being the idea of having the mic blowing feature act as the accelerator for the karts. This was scrapped due to the fear of kids running out of breath, and yeah, I can easily understand why they decided to stop that idea dead in its tracks. It's unknown to the public, at least, why this game was scrapped despite starting production. On the cancellation of the game, Saito stated that many things happened, which implies, at least to me, that this was a culmination of various factors that led to the end of the project. It was never announced and we ended up with Mario Kart DS. It's interesting to me because without it strictly being Mario Kart, you could add in things like boat racing and maybe stunt planes. I don't know. It just sounds like we could have had some potential with the idea. Ultimately though, I don't think Nintendo was very interested in introducing a spin-off game that could be considered a direct competitor to your other mainline racing series. Number 4. Fleapit. Lost arcade games have always interested me. As someone who loves retro games, this entry intrigues me so much. Fleapit was a planned platformer that was later reworked into another game named Plock on the Super Nintendo in 1993. Being developed by Stay and John Pickford, the game had pretty much identical storyline to what would become the main plot of Plock, that being that Plock finds his flag missing and goes on a big quest to get it back. Stay Pickford claims that they initially started working on Fleapit as far back as 1988, as this title screen they made for it came from that year. The game was never finished though, likely due to it using a unique arcade hardware that wasn't too successful. All that we have publicly available to us are drawings and sketches during the initial concept stage of Fleapit, drawn up by Stay Pickford. While most of these sketches are just of Plock himself, we do have the aforementioned title card, the font they use for the game, and a sketch of an unused character named Suki, owner of an item shop, who never made her way to the finalized version of Plock on the SNES. All of this material was once available on the Pickford Bros blog, however it has since been deleted and is only accessible via the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. On November 27, 2022, Stay Pickford confirmed that the Pickford Bros were no longer in possession of the game. Then, on December 2nd of the same year, he responded to someone inquiring if a version of the game may be out there belonging to someone other than the two. His response said the following: "There was a version on a ROM in a recently rediscovered version of Rare's prototype handheld machine, the Playboy. The last we heard, it had gone to a UK museum who were going to try to read the ROM, but we haven't heard if they've been successful." Attached to this post was a link to a Twitter post of his, which just redirected to a Nintendo Life article that basically covered the same thing. Rare made an experimental port of Fleapit to use on their Playboy console, which was a direct competitor to the Game Boy, which they never released. While I can't find anything that specifically says that the Playboy in the article is the same one that is mentioned in Stay's post, it's safe to assume that the prototype only had a limited number of games available to it. Regardless though, Fleapit remains lost until a ROM is confirmed to exist somewhere with someone. Number 3. LMNO. This has a sort of uncanny valley type energy to it. LMNO was a game in development by Electronic Arts, although it would never see a release. It was a first-person parkour game directed by famous filmmaker Steven Spielberg, which featured an alien humanoid and an ex-secret agent as the main characters. LMNO was one of 3 projects planned to become full franchises in an agreement between EA and Spielberg, with Project 2 becoming 2008's Boom Blocks, and the third project being completely unknown. LMNO's plot was that you were constantly trying to escape some sort of government agency, and that's really where the parkour aspect of the game comes into play, as seen in one of the very few clips of LMNO. The game had combat and even had the 2 characters, Eve and Lincoln, being able to team up and do combos, all while doing the parkour element as well. The game was slated for a PC, 360, PS3 release. However, that never happened. In 2007, EA announced massive layoffs within the industry. Among the affected was the team working on LMNO, which was already a small team. While the majority of the team was hit, the production on the game continued on for a few more years until finally in 2010, the game was confirmed cancelled by a representative of EA. While they didn't give an official reason as to why the project was cancelled, it was likely due to the staff cut, which meant their group wasn't allocated enough funds for the work, and perhaps the workload just grew substantially. Either way, LMNO was ultimately cancelled, and no builds have been released. Number 2. Hell Tycoon. Hell Tycoon was a planned game set for 2006 being developed by Anarchy Enterprises for the PC, and set to be released by their parent company Pixel After Pixel. Anarchy Enterprises, already known for their other titles such as Moon Tycoon and Ant War, had already been working on more Tycoon games, with another game, Deep Sea Tycoon 2, being slated for the same year as Hell Tycoon. These Tycoon games being produced are pretty self-explanatory. You're building a profitable tycoon in said setting, deep sea, on the moon, etc. Unfortunately though, Deep Sea Tycoon 2 would not perform to the hopes of the developers, and it's been theorized that the work being put into Hell Tycoon was subsequently redirected to Deep Sea Tycoon 2. The website for Hell Tycoon has a few screenshots of what the game was planned to be. Basically, you're the ruler of hell, that's pretty much it. It has the same sort of style as the other Tycoon games being produced by Anarchy Enterprises, and wasn't really unique from the other games outside of the fact that it took place in hell. The website, however, and at least the marketing standpoint, is the most intriguing part of this to me. Since they had their website up for years, I'm talking like the latest archive goes all the way back to 2006, and was up to the same content until 2024. Now the website doesn't even load, but it was last archived in 2023, so it was still up with the same stuff. They never went back to this site to update that they were no longer doing the game. They never gave any official updates or anything relating to Hell Tycoon. It just simply vanished from the internet without a trace. Just gone. Not with a bang, but with the quietest little whimper. It seems their website was meant to be somewhat interactive in a sense, but every time I try to engage with it, nothing happens of getting past the first screen, which just shows a pentagram. It sucks because it seems like a fun idea they had when the screenshot showed this game was modeled and everything, just swept under the rug. Sad, really. Number 1. Cabbage. This is one of Nintendo's strangest cancelled games, having spent more than 5 years in development, was advertised as coming soon in some gaming magazines, and had 3 of Nintendo's best minds working on it. This game, known only as Cabbage, was officially announced to the public at Space World 97 by Shigeru Miyamoto. The game was an intended release for the controversial Nintendo 64DD, with the wishes to utilize the 64DD's real-world time clock function. The game functioned as a pet simulator-like game, similar to a Tamagotchi pet. There were plans to be able to transfer your creature from your 64DD onto your Game Boy, so you'd be able to take the creature with you. The creator of the game, Shigesato Itoi, which I probably pronounced horribly incorrect, most well known for the Mother series, also had plans to add virtual shops to buy things for your creature. When Space World 2000 came along, there were intentions of having a setup for the game, where users could play a demo. However, this never happened due to Itoi and co-developer Tsunekazu Ishihara were busy with other projects. Miyamoto was actually quite thrilled with the game and had high hopes of it succeeding. Unfortunately, nothing publicly has been shown of the game, and in 2006, Miyamoto said that he had entirely stopped receiving updates about the development process, leading him to believe the project was silently scrapped altogether. This isn't without a loss though. Many concepts of the game survived into later creations of Nintendo franchises. Miyamoto claimed that many of the concepts initially made for Cabbage were utilized during the development of Nintendogs. Remember those little guys? Ultimately, I think this is one of those cases where an idea was conceptualized with different tools being created for this development of the game, but with more complications both developmentally and consumer-wise, the project just sort of died out quietly. The commercial failure of the 64DD was probably the nail in the coffin, to be honest, but I like to believe the team was trying to incorporate their idea into the next big console, but that's just speculation. We have no screenshots, videos, gameplay, or anything that displays the actual functions of Cabbage, and the game remains lost media to this day. And there we have it, 10 lost and interesting video game builds. I was honestly surprised to hear about the development and impact that all of these games had. I love when we get to see how different games could have been, or when we get to see the builds of games that were never released. It's so cool that there's so many out there. Who knows, I might even make a sequel video. Like I always say, this video isn't ranking these by any means, just a concise list talking about each topic. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and tell me what you think in the comments below. If you're interested in more of my content, consider subscribing. It's free. You can click the bell icon to be notified of my next upload. We have a membership thing for $1. There are literally no perks. If you just want to give me money, that's kind of cool. This is e-begging. I have a Patreon too, but there's no perks over there either. If I missed anything, feel free to tell me. Got any other lost builds you want me to talk about? Comment below. Anyways, as always guys, it's been a blast, and I will see you all next time. Peace!